Welcome to Canadian Justice. I'm Christine Van Gyn, and today is part 2 of our discussion about a case that was just decided by the BC Court of Appeal. The long-awaited appeal in a case brought by a group of surgical clinics and patients who are challenging the government monopoly healthcare system for failing patients and leaving them on seemingly endless wait lists, but simultaneously preventing them from accessing healthcare outside of that government system. This is a case that my organization, the Canadian Constitution Foundation, has been supporting, so I'm invested in the outcome of the case. Today, we'll be focusing on the legal reasoning from the decision in Cambie Surgeries and BC and what next steps in the case are going to be. We're joined today by Joanna Baron, the Executive Director of the Canadian Constitution Foundation, which is the charity I work for. And we're also joined by Craig Dennis, the lawyer representing a group of patients who intervened in the Cambie Appeal. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Now, we've already just gone over the facts of the case in part 1 of this episode, but briefly, let's remind our viewers who might not have caught that episode. Joanna, what can you tell us about the background of this case and why it was brought?
Yeah, so the case goes back more than 10 years, and it was brought by Cambie Surgery Centre as well as a group of patient plaintiffs, all of whom had the common quality that they were suffering serious ailments from lengthy waits on wait lists, ranging from a child who developed a permanent curvature in his spine and is now permanently paralyzed, a high school student who was unable to receive a soccer scholarship because she didn't get knee surgery in time, a woman who her doctor testified would have died if she hadn't gone outside the public system to be screened for colon cancer. So those patients, as well as Dr. Brian Day and Cambie Surgery Centre, brought this charter challenge, which is now one of the largest charter challenges in Canadian history, seeking to strike down certain provisions of the Medicare Protection Act.
Craig, anything briefly to add about the background of the case?
But just the legal context, there was, of course, a 2005 decision of the Supreme Court of Canada that we may touch on later that made a ruling with respect to a Quebec law that was found to restrict access to healthcare. And so that sort of set the backdrop legally for this challenge in British Columbia.
Yeah, that's a case called Shauli, which we'll discuss later about why that isn't the governing case. Well, perhaps it should be, but why it wasn't here. So, Craig, you're representing a patient coalition who intervened in this case. What can you tell me about that coalition and the perspective of those patients in the Cambie case?
Yeah, so I was fortunate to represent a group of concerned British Columbians who had had experience with the public healthcare system. The circumstances and conditions varied among them, but they shared an interest in seeing better access to healthcare. And it's important to note that there were patient interveners on the other side of the case as well. It's an important public issue. And certainly what we sought to do was to bring to the court that very patient-centered perspective. There's a lot of emphasis on access, timely access, equitable access, and the perspective that we put forward is that you can't have equitable access without access at all. And that really was sort of the patient-forward perspective we were putting forward.
And Craig, what can you tell me about what the rights engaged were in this case? What were the patients, not just your patients, but the patients in the underlying litigation, what rights did they say are violated by these laws that were being challenged?
As the case was presented to the BC Court of Appeal, the right in issue was Section 7 of the Canadian Charter of Rights, and the challenge was to specific provisions of British Columbia's Medicare Protection Act, as you said at the outset, that had the effect of restricting access to healthcare.
Craig, sorry to interrupt, just to be clear, Section 7 of the Charter governs the right or guarantees the right to life, liberty, and security of person, right?
Exactly. And there's 2 prongs to Section 7. So Section 7 says that we're guaranteed the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. And of course, that concept of the principles of fundamental justice played a central role in the court's decision. And the way that the courts approach that is 2 prongs. So first of all, has there been a deprivation of either life, liberty, or security of the person? And then second, if so, was that deprivation in accordance with what we call the principles of fundamental justice? And in order to establish a violation of Section 7, the claimant has to satisfy both of those prongs. There is a deprivation first, and second, the deprivation did not accord with the principles of fundamental justice. And as we'll talk about.
Yeah, and we'll talk about what, because that term, fundamental justice, principles of fundamental justice, has a specific meaning in law, which the court gets into. We've got to go to break, but we'll be right back.